There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? Richard Schaff talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
What in the world is going on? And I'm your host, Richard Schaff. The program is sponsored by Lincoln Log Homes. We are pro-American, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, pro-Trump, and here by the grace of God. I'm taping this on Thanksgiving Day, 2020. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for being our president, and thank you for the love that you've expressed for our country. Your latest victory just came out over the news this past night. Woke up on the news to find that the Supreme Court had ruled in our favor. Sorry, Governor Newsom, Governor Cuomo, Governor Cooper, and all the rest of you liberal governments, you who would like to be dictators. The Supreme Court just announced that you can't tell our churches how many people they can have. You can't tell our churches whether they can be open or closed. We are constitutionally protected. That's right. And thanks to our most recent Supreme Court nominee and now justice. You see, it's no longer a Roberts court. It's Clarence Thomas court. Why is it Clarence Thomas? It's because he's the oldest serving conservative on the court. And now, even if Roberts decides he wants to go to the liberals, we conservatives still have a chance of being victorious. 5-4. Thank you, Mr. President, for the legacy you've given us not only in the Supreme Court, but in all the other federal courts. No more John Roberts making the decisions. It's now the Clarence Thomas Supreme Court. And I thank you, Mr. President, beyond what words can express, for your true love for our country. Recently, this past week, Alan Dershowitz, who I have a great deal of respect for, number one, because he's probably the best known conservative constitutional attorney, happens to be a Democrat. He notes without convincing evidence the results of the election are not going to be reversed. Dershowitz, who is a Harvard professor and constitutional law expert, said last Sunday that without compelling evidence, the results of the 2020 election will not be reversed. In an interview on Fox News Sunday Morning Futures last Sunday, prior to Thanksgiving, Dershowitz said that President Donald Trump's legal team has suggested it have evidence, but that hasn't been revealed yet. I don't think the election is going to be reversed based on the numbers that I see at the moment, and based on the fact that I haven't seen the evidence, his quote. Continuing to quote him, their strongest case, if they have the evidence, is that computers may have turned hundreds of thousands of votes, end quote. Dershowitz said the legal team has laid out paths to reverse the count on the November 3rd that showed Joe Biden the winner, but there are problems with each. They have 2 or 3 legal constitutional paths, he noted. For example, in Pennsylvania, they have 2 very strong arguments. One, that the courts changed what the legislature did after counting ballots after the end of Election Day. He noted that's a winning issue on the Supreme Court. They also have a winning issue on the Supreme Court on equal protection, that some counties allowed flawed ballots to be corrected while others didn't. Dershowitz said another legal theory the legal term is pressing, which is potentially a strong one, is that some election computers, either fraudulently or by glitches, changed hundreds of thousands of votes. In that case, he noted, quote, there are enough votes to make a difference, but I haven't seen the evidence to support that, he noted, end quote. Continuing with his words, he said, so in one case they don't have the numbers, in another case they don't seem yet to have the evidence. Maybe they do. I just haven't seen it. The legal theory is there to support them if they have the numbers and they have the evidence. according to Alan Dershowitz. His words. Some legal team files to overturn Obama appointed judge seeking to block the Pennsylvania from certifying its results. This was also breaking news as of yesterday, the day before Thanksgiving. No one said it would be easy, and that's for darn sure. After first being dismissed by an Obama-appointed judge, according to the Gateway pundit, Trump's team has now filed an important appeal to the verdict. If they can flip this decision, it would certainly move the odds a lot. And listeners, they did that since this article was printed. Just yesterday, I believe it came out on Thanksgiving Day's news, or last night, that they had a win in Pennsylvania that'll end up with that case going to the Supreme Court. President Trump's legal team filed an appeal to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit on last Sunday, after Judge Matthew Braun dismissed their lawsuit seeking to block Pennsylvania from certifying its results. As reported last Saturday night, U.S. District Judge of the United States District Court for the Middle District of Pennsylvania, Matthew Braun, on Saturday, that's last Saturday, dismissed a Trump campaign lawsuit seeking to block Pennsylvania from certifying its election results. That's changed now, good listeners. Today's decision turns out to help us in our strategy to expeditiously go to the U.S. Supreme Court. Although we fully disagree with the opinion of this court, we're thankful to the Obama-appointed judge for making the anticipated decision quickly, rather than simply trying to run out the clock. That's a quote from Rudy Giuliani, attorney to Trump, and Jenna Ellis, who's senior legal advisor to Trump 2020 campaign. There's so much evidence that in Pennsylvania, Democrats eliminated our opportunity to present 50 witnesses and other evidence that election officials blatantly ignored Pennsylvania's law denying independent review. This resulted in over 682,000 ballots being cast illegally, wittingly or unwittingly. This is just an expansion of big tech, big media, correct Democrat censorship of the damning facts the American public needs to know. An update now, folks. This has been blocked in Pennsylvania. It now goes to the Supreme Court. Louis Gohmert out in Texas, he notes that the lawsuits takes time to get to the Supreme Court, and this is something we sometimes have failed to look at. An article that comes out that I got last Tuesday on the 24th of November, Louis Gohmert of Texas, Republican congressman, downplayed the certification of election results in Pennsylvania and Nevada, saying lawsuits challenging the outcome were still working their way through the courts, and even legal setbacks are part of the process to get the matter before the U.S. Supreme Court. Gohmert, for your information, served as a state district judge and Chief Justice of Texas 12th Circuit Court of Appeals. He spoke on Newsmax TV's American Agenda last Tuesday, noting that attorneys for President Donald Trump probably expected courts in some states to be hostile to their claims. It's not up to the litigants to show the evidence to professors. It's presenting that to the judges. That's what it's supposed to do. That's where it's supposed to go, Gohmert noted before his host, Bob Sellers. Gohmert's represented Texas' first congressional district along the border with Louisiana since 2005. You might not expect any change in the court results anytime soon, he noted. Now I've seen evidence that there are some liberals on the Supreme Court that have just considered whatever they wanted to. That's highly unethical and inappropriate, he noted. But, appropriately, you get evidence in before the trial court knowing that you're laying the foundation. You're building brick by brick what you want to get before the Supreme Court, and that we've been doing. And keep in mind, the election just happened over a few weeks ago, and it takes time to do the research and dig out the evidence. A paraphrase quote by Gohmert. And by the way, the other attack, the other prone to the whole thing, Sidney Powell, did you know she's a registered military lawyer and is the only one who can prosecute treason at a tribunal? Hey, folks, don't let the spin doctors and fake media tell you lies about the woman who's bringing down the giants in the swamp. Hey, and there's a bunch of them, too, more than anyone could have imagined. Powell stated that the New World Order has overthrown the Republican Party and that the Republican Party sold its soul to the New World Order in return for a large cash payment in the form of enormous bribes. I've talked to you about this previously. Sidney Powell warned that the GOP risked being neutered like a bitch by the Great Reset. Her words. She noted this to happen in 2021 if President Trump's second term is stolen from him by the children of darkness. Thank you to Sidney Powell for exposing corruption on all sides. The Republican Party sold out for some cash, and the American people have found out. Now wait and see the real uniting. Patriots stand for a nation, not a party. Rhinos, join your minions on the left and get out of America's way. We're for freedom, and we're standing up. These are strong and vividly colorful words from a serious, well-seasoned military attorney who just is not going to roll over and allow the media to drag her reputation through the mud. She's chomping at the bit to get on with the real justice, and that is the days in the court, the Supreme Court, or before a military tribunal. In an interview, Sidney Powell stated, I quote, "The Republican elite are not safe hiding behind their propaganda-fueled media situations, making unaccountable decisions in D.C. and silencing patriots who speak out against this insanity. When Trump begins his second term, a tidal wave of punishment will be coming their way, the likes of which have never been seen before in this country." Her quote. In a news report by Hal Turner, his sources state that Georgia's Republican Governor Brian Kemp and the Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger both allegedly took money from communist China, perhaps to intentionally steal the November 3rd election for Joe Biden. These two sold out their votes and constitutional rights to China for a buck. Hey, and they're both Republicans. The devil went down to Georgia. Indeed, he found some folks he could fiddle with. And Sidney Powell is bringing it out. And now you know why Attorney Sidney Powell said she was going to blow up Georgia, starting with the governor and the attorney general. According to Hal Turner, intel sources now also confirm that other governors, other secretaries of state, state election officials, county election officials, and even several big city mayors also allegedly received payments from communist China, and those payments have been tracked as well. That is why she separated officially from the Trump legal team. Now let me ask you, what do you think is going to happen? Well, got some good news for you. Why Trump will win. During his campaign rallies, President Donald Trump complained, "We got them all, or we have it all." In the coming weeks, if not days, Americans are going to find out specifically what he means. Those specific promise to shake Americans to their core by revealing years of entrenched political corruption reflected in the electoral fraud. Lawyer Sidney Powell is proving a preview. Powell, who apparently had been helping Trump's legal team prepare a case against alleged election fraud, told Howie Carr, a conservative radio host in Boston, last Friday. Remember, I'm speaking now on Thanksgiving Day. Quote, "We've got a number of smoking guns, and we may have to get witness protection for some of them. We have a lot of extremely solid evidence. It's beyond impressive and absolutely terrifying." End quote. Among those smoking guns, Hillary Clinton used fraud to steal California Democrat presidential primary 4 years ago from Bernie Sanders. When people told him about it, Powell noted, instead of exposing it, he also sold out. Second, an employee of the Defense Department in a conference call that included Bernie Sanders and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez told government officials how to commit sabotage in their respective office. There were a couple of hundred people in that call, Powell noted. Next, China, Iran, Serbia, Liechtenstein, they played key roles in interfering with our presidential election. On Saturday night in an interview with Newmax, Powell mentioned each Democrat candidate in Pennsylvania received 35,000 extra votes. I'd be willing to bet it happened everywhere. A quote from Sidney Powell. Next, states recalibrated voting machines after deadlines for modification passed. Machines awarded a value of 1.25 for each vote former President Joe Biden received, but calculated every Trump vote at only 0.75. You can see the reports of the fractional numbers for their votes, Powell noted. A former military officer from Venezuela noted that he had helped develop the machines, testified that they could be manipulated. He knew as soon as the machines were turned on in those key states. He said that the massive support for Trump had broken all of the projections, the algorithm that had been programmed. So they had to stop counting and backfill the vote with fraudulent mail-in ballots or whatever means necessary. You remember it on election night when they stopped. They had a flood reported in a building down in Georgia. Why? To stuff the boxes, folks. That same official, Powell noted, told Fox News Lou Dobbs on November 16th was, quote, personally in briefings when all of this was discussed and planned, beginning with Hugo Chavez, how it was designed there and then saw it happening in this country. Powell, who filed a lawsuit challenging Georgia's tabulation last Wednesday, continues to receive severe criticism and ridicule, even accusing him of lying. But Powell is subject to the same laws against libel and slander as any other American. If her assertions against Clinton, Sanders, and Ocasio-Cortez, for starters, were found to show malicious disregard for the truth, and ensuing conviction would destroy her career, her reputation. Sidney Powell is a serious lawyer. She's not going to make a false claim, period. A quote from Larry Johnson, a counterterrorism specialist who spent 4 years in the State Department. Well, Rudy Giuliani, one of Trump's main attorneys, issued this statement last Sunday. Quote, Sidney Powell is practicing law on her own. She's not a member of the Trump legal team. She's also not a lawyer for the president in his personal capacity. I shared that with you last week. Powell corroborated that release with her own. Quote, I agree with the campaign statement that I am not part of the campaign's legal team. I never signed your retainer agreement or sent the president or the campaign a bill for my services or fees. My intent has been to expose all of the fraud I could find and let the chips fall where they may, whether it be upon Republicans and Democrats. And as I just pointed out, it fell on some Republicans in the state of Georgia. Trump's team is filing civil cases. Powell approaches the allegations of electoral fraud as a criminal matter. That's a big difference, folks. We're pursuing two different theories, Giuliani told Dobbs last Monday night. Trump's team was concentrating on misconduct of the election by state officials in at least 4 or 5 different states. So, what does it mean? Well, after Powell spoke with Dobbs, reports began circulating about a American military operation conducted to take servers in Germany. At first, many thought the servers belonged to 2 election technology firms, Dominion and Cycle. Dominion, founded by Venezuelans, manufactured the questionable voting machines used in this month's election. For those servers, apparently, belong to the CIA. They have a field office in Frankfurt, Germany. The State Department also operates a consulate in that city. The U.S. military has full authority to this because any CIA activity in the European theater is being conducted using military cover. In other words, CIA officers to be identified to the German government as, or anyone else asking, as military employees or consultants. So such an operation would have been carried out with the U.S. law enforcement present to take custody of the evidence. That means that the evidence will be under the control of the Department of Justice through U.S. attorneys and can be used in court or other judicial proceedings. Neither CIA Director Gina Haspel nor FBI Director Christopher Wray knew about this operation. If Powell does not represent Trump directly, she works in tandem with his legal team. If so, Trump would have the authority to declassify any information that Powell could use. Such a scenario would explain the comments. You have to realize how many forces, including many in the government, have benefited from this system. They know it worked the way it worked, and they used it to install the people they wanted to install in particular offices. I think the fraud of the election goes further than the president. I think they did it to any particularly strong Republican candidate this time around. In her closing words, in other words, the United States faces its biggest political and existential crisis since the Civil War, if not in its history. We live in exciting times, good listeners. But let's analyze the worst election shenanery in U.S. history. With the 2020 election a total fraud, it's time for us patriots nationwide to become ungovernable. Conservatives must rise up against the Democrat legacy of corruption. Our central election, our general election, it was a fraud. This from John Velsic, U.S. Navy retired, through all news pipeline. The methods and manners of election fraud are numerous. The talking heads and progressive socialists continue to blather there is no evidence of voter fraud. They expect the American people to nod and go along with pronouncements they make. They keep claiming that the lawsuits the president has filed and will continue to file are without merit. The media has not investigated any of these lawsuits, which was mostly filed by individual groups of citizens and rejected by the respective individual state justices. The mainstream media, who spent almost 4 years on the Russian collusion hoax, could see no reason in this election. They couldn't see any reason, even though they never conceded to President Trump. Their hypocrisy is astounding. The progressive socialists and never-Trumpers continue to lie about having no evidence of voter fraud. In the next breath, they demanded that President Trump's lawyer turn over all evidence without even going to court. I'm trying to decide if this is because they're unaware that the evidence will be shown in court shortly, or just want the opportunity to spew forth the lies. This is already happening right here in America, in our courts, and in our news. Going by the name The Great Reset is just another attempt to steal the election in order to subjugate the American people. Threats, violence, doxing for the mobs have now become a way of life for the progressive socialist Democrats and their minions. This nationwide voter fraud is not going to be allowed to stand. Patriots in this country will rise up if this election continues to be stolen. No amount of violence or threats will force the Americans to submit to the John Kerry wing of socialist globalism. George Soros will not be able to walk away without being damaged. There are repercussions to what they're attempting. They talk of a civil war. The civil war will turn into more than they have bargained for. In closing again, I say thank you again to President Donald Trump. Your true love for our country that hasn't been shown in my lifetime. You have shown it for your country. Thank you, Mr. President. I stand with you in your hours to come. God bless until our next broadcast.